With the 2019 season and the 2010s decade of Formula One now being at an end, we can take the time to look back at what has been a pretty good season that certainly has flown by. I mean, I still remember it being March, the Australian Grand Prix, the Ferraris absolutely struggling for pace. I still remember that very well. Certainly does not feel like it was 8 months ago. But now we can look back at some of the absolutely amazing performances by the drivers this season, as well as some not so great performances. But in this video, I will be creating an F1 tier list where I'm going to be ranking the drivers based on the performances relative to expectations at the start of the year. And there are 5 tiers: amazing, great, good, average, and bad. So I'm going to be putting all the drivers into a tier, and let's see what we end up with. So I'm going to be going in reverse championship order. So we'll start down with George Russell and work our way up to Lewis Hamilton. So now guys, let's get into the video. First off, we have rookie George Russell, who finished last in this year's championship with 0 points, but I certainly think that he did a lot better than last place this season. He certainly deserves some points. After all, it's not his fault that Williams was just so off the pace this season, but I am going to put him in the great category. So I think that he's had an absolutely amazing first season in Formula One, obviously coming from Formula 2, and he has absolutely whitewashed Kubica. I mean, he has outqualified him, I think, 21-0. He's the only driver on the grid that has done that. He's also been pretty good in the races. Unfortunately, like I said, didn't score any points because the Williams was just that slow, but I think he's shown a lot of maturity, some really good consistent pace, and even if he hasn't had the best car, he's still been able to show his potential, and perhaps he could be a future Mercedes driver or even a future world champion. We shall see. But yeah, George Russell, our first driver, he is going to be in the great category. Okay, so next on our list we have Robert Kubica, who finished 19th in the championship with a solitary point. So it's safe to say that Robert Kubica has not at all had a good season, probably one of the worst drivers on the grid in fact, but I don't really think it matters at this point. After his rally crash, I mean, it was so horrific that it was even a huge accomplishment on its own just to return to F1. So I think you have to give him some huge respect for that, obviously. Unfortunately, it didn't go the way he hoped to. But yeah, I was a really big Robert Kubica fan back in the day, like 2010, 2011. I was really young, but I really liked seeing him in his Renault days. And I'm sure if he didn't have his accident, he certainly would have won a lot more than just one race. But yeah, Robert Kubica, I'm going to put him in the bad category simply because he has been quite off the pace this season, got convincingly beaten by Russell, but again, still amazing that he was able to return from the accident and get back into Formula One. So next off, we have Romain Grosjean of Haas, who finished 18th in the championship with 8 points, which actually matches his driver number 8. But I think this has been an absolute shocker. Maybe not so much for Grosjean, but certainly for Haas. I mean, I don't think anyone expected them to be this off the pace. I think it's just a matter of them not being able to figure out the car, and especially those Pirelli tires. They seem to have a lot of problems with it. But yeah, so a lot of it is down to Haas, but I would not say Grosjean has had a great season either this year. I think he's just a bit passive in my opinion. I think there are some other drivers in F1 that potentially maybe deserve a spot, and I was really surprised when Haas retained him. I really thought they'd go for Hlkenberg, but surprisingly they kept Grosjean despite having quite an incident-prone season. I mean, sometimes he gets unfairly blamed for incidents, but a lot of times it's not the case, so I'm going to have to put him in the bad category. Next, we have Antonio Giovinazzi, who is actually another rookie on this list. So I'm going to put him in average. I think he's had a decent season. Certainly, he started out... he had quite a tough start to his F1 career. He was really off the pace, getting into a few incidents here and there. But I do like the fact that he has steadily improved, and the gap to his teammate Raikkonen certainly has closed. And that's why he has been re-signed to 2020, given another chance by Alfa Romeo. So it'll be interesting to see his progress. But overall for Giovinazzi, not a great start to the season, but he certainly improved as he went on. So good on him for that. Next driver we have is Kevin Magnussen, also of Haas, just like Romain Grosjean. And yeah, like I said with Grosjean, it has been an absolute shocker of a year for Magnussen, so no surprises that he's finished so low in the championship, 16th place with 20 points, which again matches his driver number. So I guess Haas will have to have, I don't know, 98, 99 for the driver numbers next season. I don't know, but I think he's been slightly better than Grosjean. I think maybe in terms of race pace, qualifying pace, they've been about equal, but I think Magnussen's been in slightly less incidents, just generally been a slightly more consistent one of the two, but I wouldn't say he's had an amazing season, so I won't put him in bad like Grosjean, but I will put him in the average category. Again, not entirely his fault, but yeah, let's see if Haas can have a better season next year. They really should. Next off, we have the Canadian Lance Stroll, who finished 15th in the championship with 21 points. Now, I'm going to say that Lance Stroll, I think he gets way too much hate as a driver, certainly because of his pay driver status. I think he does get quite a bit of hate, but I'm not going to say that he's had an amazing season this year. I'm going to put him in the average category. I think the main thing that with Lance Stroll, his qualifying pace is absolutely atrocious. Probably the worst qualifier on the grid. I think he got beaten by like 16-5 to Perez in the qualifying battles. He is a bit better in the races, but he's gained the most places on the start out of all of the F1 drivers, but I mean the stat is a bit irrelevant if you consider the fact that he's qualifying down so low, so he should be gaining those positions anyways, if you know what I mean. But I think it's been a bit of a disappointing year for Lance. Not terrible, but certainly I think he does need to raise his game a little bit if he wants to stay in F1. Even if his dad is owning the team, I think he still needs to up his game for 2020. Next, we have Nico Hlkenberg. He finished 14th in the championship on 37 points. And as you guys know, he is now going to leave F1 after a 10-year career, unfortunately, with no podiums, which is certainly quite sad. As for Hlkenberg, I think I'll probably put him in average. Yeah, in average. I think he's had just a bit of an off year, maybe not the best. I mean, Renault also has been disappointing, but I think he's just made a few mistakes, he's just been slightly worse than Ricciardo, not that much worse, but slightly worse than Ricciardo. He has made a few mistakes. He did have a chance to get a podium, but then he bottled it yet again. But yeah, it's quite sad for Hlkenberg that it's his last year, obviously, in Formula 1. Not a great way to end his 3 years at Renault, but overall, it has been a decent career for Hlkenberg at least, and yeah, he is in the average category. After that, Daniel Kvyat of Toro Rosso, he finished 13th with, again, 37 points. I guess it must have been the count back. That's why he's ahead of Hlkenberg, obviously. But for him, I think I'd say I'm going to put him in average. I think the high point of his season was definitely getting that podium in Germany. Obviously, the redemption of after being, dropped by Red Bull, then he gets the podium before Pierre Gastly, who was at Red Bull. So that was quite funny. But then after that, I think he sort of faded into obscurity a little bit as the season went on. Then Gastly, came back from Toro Rosso and is sort of seen to have the upper hand over Kvyat, which isn't great news if Kvyat does want to have a second chance at Red Bull, which I don't really think is going to happen. So yeah, he's an average. Next driver is Kimi Rikknen, 12th in the championship, 45 points. Kimi, obviously a veteran. He's been racing in F1 even before I was born, actually, even before I was born, which is quite a long time. But I'm going to put him in good. I think there wasn't really many expectations. We wouldn't expect him to be driving, like he was at the peak of his career, but he still had a solid season, giving Alfa Romeo some good points, a lot of experience. I think he did fade a little bit also as Alfa's competitiveness did decrease a little bit, but he still did finish on 45 points, which is not bad considering that the Sauber hasn't really been that good this year. So yeah, a pretty decent season for Kimi Rikknen. Next off, we have the Milkman, Lando Norris, who has made such a name for himself in Formula 1. I mean, he is probably one of the most popular drivers in Formula 1, and I bet that a lot of fans probably have never heard of him 2 or 3 years ago. But yeah, it's been a pretty good season for him. I mean, he's obviously been at McLaren, which, not gonna lie, has probably been the most comfortably the best midfield car this season. He did get beaten by Sainz quite a lot in terms of points, but a lot of this is luck. I mean, Lando Norris has definitely had a lot of bad luck this season, especially at Spa. I mean, retiring from the 6th on the last lap, that's gotta hurt, but we did get some pretty funny team radio out of it. But overall, it has been quite a decent rookie season for Lando Norris. He's done quite good. I think he did get the Formula One Rookie of the Year, so congratulations to him. But yeah, he's been pretty impressive in qualifying, actually. I think out-qualifying Sainz 11-10. I think Sainz has had the slight upper hand in races, but obviously for Lando, this will come with experience. But obviously, a really good season, so I will put him in great, I guess, alongside George Russell. After that, just above him, we have Sergio Perez, who has had quite a good season. I think he's gone a bit under the radar. I mean, once I realized he was all the way up in 10th in the championship, which is quite good because the racing point this season, it certainly has not been quick. It's been a bit of a transition year for the team, obviously, after being bought out from Force India, becoming Racing Point. It's been a transition year, so I think they're still figuring things out. But Perez, well, he's done what he's known to do, squeezing every bit out of the car and just being a consistent midfield driver that always scores the points, and inevitably it's going to add up. He finished 10th in the championship, which is very, really, really good. So I think I'm going to put him in probably great. I think, yeah, great. So next off, we have Daniel Ricciardo. He finished 9th in the championship with 54 points. So I think Ricciardo has had a good season, but by driving standards, I mean, expectations-wise, probably not, but that's more down to Renault. Renault has just been very disappointing this year. We certainly expected them to be in McLaren's position, not quite at the level of the top teams, but certainly a clear cut above the rest inside of the midfield. That clearly has not happened. I mean, they did get 5th, which isn't too bad, but they certainly regressed a little bit from last year. But Ricciardo certainly did well to get 54 points out of that Renault. Have been a few mistakes here and there, like Brazil, where he crashed into Magnussen. But overall, it's been a decent season for Ricciardo. A bit disappointing. I know he probably wants to do better, but I think he did eke out probably close to the maximum of that Renault car. So I would put him in great. Next, we have Alex Albon. He finished 8th in the championship with 92 points. And it has been quite a roller coaster season for Albon, obviously starting for Toro Rosso as a rookie, then getting the dream move up to Red Bull. So I'm going to put him in good. I'm not going to say that he's impressed. I mean, he was pretty good at Toro Rosso, and it was obviously a surprise how bad Gasly was in that Red Bull. When Albon was moved up to Red Bull, I was quite critical of the move, to be honest. I thought that they should have put up Kvyat because I think it was a bit unfair on Albon that they would put a driver with such little experience, such high expectations. So I think that Albon has certainly, I think, matched those expectations. Wouldn't say exceeded them. I think he's been slightly higher up than Gasly, but you could also put that down to the Red Bull being a bit more competitive compared to the midfield than it was when Gasly was driving, if you know what I mean. But I think Albon has been good enough, and it's not like Red Bull have too many other options, so it's better for them to be patient with him, see how he develops. He'll certainly have to step it up in 2020, but I think he's done a good enough job, I'd say, in 2019 to keep his seat at Red Bull, at least for the time being. So yeah, that is Alex Albon, and next we have Pierre Gastly, and I said it was a roller coaster season for Albon. I mean, that is a complete understatement for Gasly. His season has just been like this, a complete roller coaster of emotions. I mean, from getting dropped by Red Bull to getting P2 in Brazil, out-dragging a Mercedes in a Toro Rosso, and obviously with that Ayrton Senna-esque team radio in Brazil, that gave me the chills. That was absolutely amazing. But I'm gonna have to put the Pierre Gastly as average. I think I'd certainly give his second half of the season a good, maybe even a great, but ultimately, I think the first half of the season in Red Bull, I think that was career defining. It's unlikely that he's going to get a second chance with Red Bull. I will be surprised if he did, but if he wanted to secure a long-term future at a top team, then he needed to perform at Red Bull. And I guess there was a combination of factors that unfortunately he was unable to perform at Red Bull. He got dropped. He's now at Toro Rosso. He's doing a good job. He just seems to be a bit more comfortable at the team for some reason. I don't know what kind of factors can influence that, but you can clearly see that he's driving better at Toro Rosso. He's more comfortable at the team. Yeah, so it's going to be an average season for Pierre Gasly. He's been amazing at times, but then bad at some other times. So that's why I'm going to put him at average this season, I guess, because when it mattered, he was average. Next, we have the smooth operator, Carlos Sainz. I mean, he's finished 6th in the championships, 96 points, scoring a podium. I mean, what a legendary season this guy has had. I could not have expected this. I mean, when he got dropped by Renault, moved to McLaren, I thought, it's a bit of a step back for him, but it clearly has not at all been a step back. Not only has McLaren been amazing, but so has Sainz. He has drove an absolutely almost flawless season in 2019, scoring 96 points, well clear of anyone else in the midfield. I guess if you exclude Gastly and Alban for being at Red Bull for like half the season, but he still beat them. But yeah, he's actually outscored every other midfield team by himself, so that is really impressive. He's just really upped his game this season. He seems like a completely different driver, a lot more comfortable driving without a lot less pressure, certainly a lot more confidence. And yeah, he's just always been really consistent, top of the midfield in the races. I remember he started out the season a bit shaky, but since then he's been absolutely on fire. And I'm going to put him in amazing. Yeah, I'm going to put him in amazing. The first guy that is in the top tier. But what I will say, maybe I wouldn't give him my driver of the season simply because the McLaren was just completely a cut above the rest. And he was competing against a rookie teammate. So it's a bit of an unfair advantage. But I don't really want that to take away from his performance. But I wouldn't quite give him as my driver of the season. So those were all the midfield drivers, but now let's get into the top 5 in the championship. So in 5th place, we have Sebastian Vettel, who finished on 240 points, had 1 win and 9 podiums. So yeah, it has certainly not been a great season at all for Sebastian Vettel. Probably, I would say, his worst season since joining Ferrari. I mean, I don't think it's been terrible, but at the same time, not at all very good. But, I mean, I don't want to get too much into this. I mean, I've already done like 2 videos on it. But yeah, it's just a case of not being comfortable with the car. Maybe his mind is on other things. And maybe just being a bit unsettled by the emergence of Leclair, a driver so good, but only in his second season that put Vettel into quite a lot of pressure. So yeah, I think when Ferrari did seem to make updates to the car around Singapore, you could certainly see an improvement, and he did put in some really good laps, some really good performances. Unfortunately, it was plagued by reliability in those periods. But yeah, we have seen flashes of Vettel being comfortable with the car, being back to his old self, but so the mistakes have certainly still been there. And yeah, I'm going to put him, I think it would be a bit too harsh to put him in average. I mean, yeah, I think I'm going to put him in good. Maybe by his standards, it would be an average season. But I think generally, I think he's been good. I think if you put him down in average, that is a bit too harsh on Vettel. But yeah, I don't want to say too much more about him. I could go on for like 20 minutes about that. But yeah, now let's go to Charles Leclerc, who finished at 4th, 264 points, 2 wins, and 10 poles. And actually 7 pole positions, which is the most out of all the drivers. So where should I put Charles Leclerc? I think I'm going to put him in great. So let's talk about the good. Let's talk about the goods first, I guess. He has been absolutely on fire in qualifying. Like I said, 7 pole positions, the most out of all of the drivers. I mean, yeah, he has come into Ferrari, established himself as probably the de facto number 1 driver, beat the 4-time world champion, and yeah, what an impressive season it's been for him. Had some really emotional wins in Belgium after the tragic events in the F2 race, and then also in Monza having Ferrari's first win in like 10 years. So it certainly has been a special season for the young Monegasque, but at the same time, I would not say it has been perfect, but it's not like we expected him to be perfect in only the his second season in Formula 1. He certainly has made mistakes, maybe not as many as Vettel, but they certainly have been there. Hasn't been perfect. For example, in Azerbaijan, where he made that mistake in Q2, crashing out, potentially throwing away a race win. And yeah, like I said, Leclerc has 7 pole positions, which is certainly very impressive, but he has only converted 2 of these into race wins, so 2 out of 7. That certainly isn't a great conversion rate. Obviously, not all of his fault. The infamous Ferrari strategy certainly screwed him over quite a lot of those times, but yeah, the drivers that I put into amazing, they have been pretty much flawless for the entire season, and Charles Leclerc, don't get me wrong, was absolutely amazing, but he was not flawless at all this season. So yeah, that is why he isn't great, but just not yet at amazing. Obviously, only his second season, that is mostly why, but I'm sure he will have a lot of amazing seasons in the future. So next up, we have a Max Verstappen, and I'm going to waste no time. There you go, up there, straight to amazing. I mean, you'd be a fool not to put him into the top tier. I mean, what a season he has had, continuing his impressive form from the second half of 2018. I mean, something is just clicking for this guy. I mean, he's continuing with these great performances, getting third in the championship, despite having a slower car than the Ferraris. He's managed to leapfrog both of the Ferrari drivers, which is very impressive. He took 3 really good wins this year in Austria, Austria and Germany, actually recovering from bad starts to win, and obviously another dominant victory in Brazil. So yeah, Red Bull certainly were struggling at the beginning of the year, but as they became more competitive, it was around the summer break. I mean, there was a lot of optimism with Verstappen. Could he potentially fight for the World Championship? He was driving really well at that point. Then I think Red Bull just took a bit of a step back. Maybe weren't as competitive, but Verstappen has just been driving really well this entire season. I mean, the odd 1 or 2 mistakes, but people are still human. He hasn't made as many mistakes as Charles Leclair, and has been consistently really good, had some great battles, done some really good driving, thrashed both of his teammates this season. So yeah, no doubt that Max Verstappen has had an amazing season. Next up though, can Red Bull reward this driving, and Honda, can they provide him with a championship winning car to take the fight to Hamilton and Mercedes? That is what the question is. Okay, so now top 2, the Mercedes guys. Second place, Valtteri Bottas. How many points did he score? Give me 1 second. He scored 326 points, 4 wins, and 15 podiums. So it's been, I'd say, where should I put him at? I think I'll put him in great. I think I'll put him in great, because I think certainly by his standards, he's had a really strong season. I think probably his strongest since joining Mercedes, arguably the strongest of his career. I think it was certainly a big improvement to 2018. Remember the start of the season, Bottas 2.0, all the porridge and that stuff. He never ended up fighting for the World Championship, and his challenge kind of faded a little bit after Germany. But overall, I think he has certainly stepped it up, and that is more than enough for above Mercedes' expectations, taking a few wins. Obviously not quick enough to challenge Lewis over a whole season, but certainly quick enough to pick up the pieces and get that occasional win when he is really quick on his day. But yeah, that's Bottas. I'm going to put him in the second highest, the great category. And now we got the champ, Lewis Hamilton. He has been amazing this season. And what I'm going to say, by his standards, I don't think he's had as good of a season as 2017 and 2018. And that is the scary part. He has absolutely dominated this championship. I mean, 7-8 races in, we all knew that he had it, but he hasn't even been driving at I don't think his absolute best. He hasn't even need to come to that level. That is how much better he is, I guess, than the rest of the field. I mean, in Abu Dhabi, that was an absolutely dominant performance, a Grand Slam leading from start to finish. So really good for him. It's been an amazing season for Lewis Hamilton. Maybe not as good as in 2018, but he simply didn't even need to get to that level. I mean, it was like a Prost-esque season, just driving, as much as you need to win the championship. So that is certainly the scary part out of all of this. But yeah, really flawless season from Lewis Hamilton. I mean, if he keeps this up, I really think that if Mercedes provides him with a really good car, which they have like the last 6 years, then he's almost certainly going to break Schumacher's record and end up with 8 titles, which will be a really exciting prospect. But yeah, guys, that was my version of the F1 tier list ranking all of the drivers. So yeah, it was quite fun to create that one. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below whether you agree with it, or probably disagree with it, what changes you would make to the list. But yeah, I had a great time doing this one. And yeah, this is the first video of, I guess, my end of rest of 2019 end of season content. So I will also be doing a video about the biggest disappointments and surprises of the season. I do a video reacting to my 2019 predictions, which I know will be quite fun. And then I got some videos that is going to round off actually the decade, some videos about the 2010s decade in general. So yeah, lots of good stuff coming up for the end of 2019. And to make sure that you don't miss any of that, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you can see more of these great videos. As always, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.